Alex Salmond has warned David Cameron not to try to bully or intimidate Scotland over the issue of the referendum on independence. The First Minister insists that he has the right to hold a referendum on his own terms. But David Cameron says that's not true. The main points of difference between the two governments are who has the legal power to call the referendum. Should the referendum include an option that falls short of full independence, so-called devolution max? And should 16 and 17-year-olds be allowed to vote? In the Commons, peace broke out as David Cameron and Ed Miliband joined forces in their support for the United Kingdom. Well, while the constitutional issues have been the source of the conflict in the last 24 hours, the economic questions behind independence are no less intractable. There'll be major questions over who gets what, the oil revenues, the national debt, and of course the bankrupt banks that had to be rescued by taxpayers. Our economic editor, Faisal Islam, examines now how the financial choices that will be central to any referendum campaign will pan out. Faisal.
John, the United Kingdom, despite its problems, remains the sixth largest economy in the world, and now Scotland could choose to peel away, its independence up for grabs. But beyond the politics, there's some fundamental and messy economic choices Scotland will have to make that could affect the whole United Kingdom. Let's take oil revenues. These were £6.5 billion in 2010, a tidy sum, and of course that varies with the international price of oil. The year before, revenues were over £12 billion. But how should they be shared out? Because oil is produced offshore from the country's continental shelf, it's currently treated as a resource for the whole of the UK. So you could argue that Scotland's share should reflect its share of the its share of the population, about 8% of the total, which would be just over £540 million. Here's an alternative approach championed in Edinburgh, trying to work out where the Scottish boundary of the continental shelf would be. And if you do that, the vast majority of oil is produced within this line, so Scotland's share of the oil revenues would be much bigger, about 90%, or nearly £6 billion. And even then, there's a strong debate about where this median line is that would be vitally important to an independent Scotland's finances. And what currency will these revenues be measured in? At one point, there was much talk that an independent Scotland would ditch the pound and join the euro instead. But that's become rather less attractive as the eurozone has plunged into a debt crisis. An alternative would be to keep the pound, creating a sterling area. But that would mean that Scottish interest rates should still be set by those people sitting in the Bank of England, and they'd be basing their decisions on the economic situation in Wales, Northern Ireland and mainly England. So Scotland could face interest rates that are too high for its own economy. And how would we share out the national debt, which by 2014 is heading towards £1.4 trillion? And what about the liabilities linked to the Royal Bank of Scotland, rescued by taxpayers who have underwritten £187 billion of toxic assets? How much should Scotland take of that? Scottish nationalists say the failure of RBS was the fault of lax London regulation. But how about this? A letter from First Minister Alex Salmond to Sir Fred Goodwin over the deal that nearly bankrupted the whole country, the bid by RBS for the Dutch group ABN AMRO. In it, Mr Salmond says it's in Scottish interests for RBS to be successful, and he concludes, good luck with the bid. It's personally signed, yours for Scotland, Alex. Of course, Scotland wouldn't be the first country to secede. The split of the Czech Republic and Slovakia required 30 separate treaties. All these problems may well have solutions, but the complexities of splitting up are only just becoming clear. There are far more questions than the single one to be asked in a referendum in 2014. John.